A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Respected brothers and sisters, welcome back to the After Maghrib podcast. Hope you're having a fantastic week. It is absolutely scorching in London this week. So we are truly enjoying the summer vibes. Alhamdulillah, and I hope you guys are as well. This week we've got a really interesting discussion to have, and that is talking about religious trauma. It's a phenomenon which we're hearing more and more about, and if you don't know what it is, this is your chance to get a bit of an understanding as to what that concept actually means. Does it exist? Is it something which is exclusive to the Muslim community, or maybe not? And if it's something that we've been affected by in maybe our own lives, in our youth, in our childhood, or even maybe in our later years. But before we get into that, and before we introduce our special guest, it's time to introduce the special co-host, Sayed Ali. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
How you doing, bro?
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, all good. Enjoying the weather.
I am.
Making the most.
Embracing the rays of the sunshine and making the most of vitamin D.
Said you're the Shams, you're the Nur.
Astaghfirullah.
Honestly, you bring the light, you bring the energy.
You're too kind.
So, alhamdulillah. This is a really interesting topic.
It is. And when I knew that we're gonna have this conversation, I had about 2 days ago, I gave myself some flashbacks to try and see if I have possibly, faced any religious trauma, but I'll save it for the conversation.
Yeah.
It's time to introduce the guest.
Absolutely, and we welcome Sister Zoha Hemraj. Assalamu alaikum, sister.
Alaikum assalam, rahmatullah.
How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, all good.
Joined us all the way from Dubai, studying in the UK. For those who don't know, you can tell us maybe a bit about yourself and your background, maybe.
So, my name is Zoha Hemraj, and I am currently studying optometry in Cardiff University. And yeah, it is really an honor to be here.
Yeah,
definitely.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you for coming.
It's very nice. Obviously, you reached out to us, and you also have your own podcast, Baraza Banter, which is absolutely incredible, hosted by yourself and another sister.
Yes, so two of my friends.
Fantastic, yeah. What kind of interests you, and what in the community engages you? I mean, obviously, for those who don't know, of course, you've also recently won a Youth Leadership Award from World Federation at the Exco in London, and of course you're involved in a lot of youth work. What do you find interesting? What kind of makes you get involved?
So I guess one of the mottos for my life is to make a difference wherever I go, or with whatever I can do.
Yeah.
And so I try to make a difference with, let's say, firstly, it's important to identify, okay, what does the community need, as an example? And then to be like, okay, fine, what are the solutions, or what are the steps that have been taken to fulfill that need? If not, then what can we do? Instead of just sit and be like, oh yeah, we have these problems, oh, very bad, inshallah, they're cured. Because yes, inshallah, you should be identifying or acknowledging that you have that problem, but don't just stop there. Or many a times, like as an example, when we say, Islam is very mixed with culture these days, it always just remains at a talk level that, right, that's very bad, but what are you doing to contribute towards it? Yeah. So those are the points. Let's say, how they say in medical terms, you press the nerve that hurts the most. Those are the nerves I like to catch. So, okay, fine. Okay. These are the problems we're having. How can we solve them?
Alhamdulillah. Okay.
So, yeah.
Really good. A lot to talk about. And obviously, we've also got Sayed Mushtaba, as always, behind the camera. How are you doing, Sayed?
Alhamdulillah, how are you guys?
Yeah, all good. Enjoying the weather.
Yeah.
Looking forward to discussion.
It's very hot.
Absolutely.
Don't know how we're going to go through the whole podcast.
Inshallah khair. Sayed Ali, where can we kind of begin on this?
I think before we even, dive into this, I think a topic that's going to interest everyone's ears, and inshallah, we can all engage even after the podcast, be on the comment section, wherever everyone's listening. Can you just give me, so I can understand religious trauma a little better?
Mm-hmm. So like a definition.
Like a small summary, maybe? Yeah.
Okay. So it's actually important to start by defining the term, because even like the first time I introduced it or I spoke about it with my parents, they were like, wait, what do you mean religiosity can result in trauma? How is that possible? It's like a juxtaposition of words. So religious trauma, let's say, is basically misinterpretation of religious values that can result in different levels of trauma. So now people might listen to the word trauma and be like, whoa, like it's not as
associate PTSD or something.
Exactly. Yes. So it's not as exaggerative as but to be honest, there's different levels of trauma. It starts with a classical conditioning of someone not wanting to go towards an action, to, let's say, the severe level of someone having medical conditions when exposed to a certain thing. So there's different levels, and it's important now more than any other time or more than anything, because people are starting to appreciate and notice these things more nowadays, is to identify that, okay, fine, if someone does have a religious trauma, it should stop right there instead of it passing on to the next generation. Not like, if I've experienced this, okay, you need to experience it as well.
And we have to make clear as well, it's not a demonization of religion in any way.
Oh, of course not.
So by no means at all are we interested in demonizing religion or making our religious teachers or our religious centers or our religious communities those which are villains or those which are wrong in any way. More it's perhaps a case of understanding contemporary practices of Islam and maybe understanding ways to improve them. Of course, because many of us have grown up in different societies and different cultures, our level of practice and our experience of practicing Islam has varied in many cases. So the approach we take in understanding religious trauma is incredibly important. But obviously that's kind of maybe a disclaimer for us to set forward at the beginning of the conversation. Some people talk about religious trauma from, to be really blunt, the Christian angle, because Christianity and religious trauma, there's so much content online about it. But also you hear a lot of the time the term spiritual trauma.
Yeah.
I know you said before the podcast we shouldn't mention that.
Yeah.
Why?
So that's because, so interestingly, you know, the episode that, so we've done an episode about religious trauma on Baraza Banter as well. Yeah. And initially the title was spiritual trauma. Until it came to my attention that, is it really possible for spirituality to result in trauma? And what is the difference between spirituality and religiosity? So essentially, the deen that came down, or the religion, or the message, basically, that came down was one. And then it was people that separated and made their own, like, you know, their own different groups and their own ideologies, you know, on it. Or they took different parts of it. As there's an ayah in the Quran also that says that, you know, do you leave the rest of the book and only take what interests you? So anyway, so different religions, different people took different ideologies from it. And then the way they interpreted that message results in the trauma. Again, as there's another ayah in the Quran that says that whatever khair that comes to you is from Allah, but whatever bad that comes to you, it is from your own hands, right? So these things are our own doings. And essentially it is religious, or let's say religious misinterpretations that can result in trauma. Spirituality, that's the one essential message that came down, is the haqq. And the truth can never really result in trauma, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Because the truth is the truth at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think it's how we, you know, share, you know, what's wajib, what's haram. Because I think when it comes to religious trauma, the way I've understood it, if I can be blunt about it, is, for example, you get to a stage where, you know what, stop telling me what to do. Or, for example, okay, I know this is, for example, this is what's expected of me, this is what's wajib of me, for example, but I don't want to do it. You know, only God can judge me. So that sort of feeling that people have to reach the religious trauma.
It's essentially a rebellion that starts. That, you know what, now you're telling me I will purposely not do it. You're telling me to come sit inside mosque, I will purposely stand outside defensive. Just to annoy you, basically. So there's like tons and tons of examples that we have with this regard as well.
And there's probably ways to break it down as well. So when we, of course, understand that, like, let's exclude Islam, okay, for a sec. Like, if we talk about Christianity, and I know I mentioned that earlier, but like, obviously the Christian world right now faces its own issues. And for those who've kind of studied it, the establishment of Christianity is so hell-bent on keeping its and preserving its audience that a lot of the time they'll go to any extreme or any kind of position to keep the audience, and especially to keep youth. All right. So, for example, let's talk about missionaries. You see a lot of cases where, for example, religious trauma occurs when preachers or kind of head of missionary churches will guilt trip their own followers by saying that if you don't do this, God's going to punish you. Or if you don't do this, you're not getting God's message out there. Or, for example, if you don't give a part of your allowance back to the church, God will punish you and people won't get fed and won't drink. Now, for example, a lot of these messages and phrases could also be applied to Islamic teachings. So you could talk about khums, and you could talk about your wajibat, and you could talk about doing da'wah and tabligh and apply it in the same way. But of course, there's nuances that as Muslims, both as community leaders and community members, we've got to practice. But But I think Christianity is a really interesting place because just to begin, because there's so many lessons that can be learned, and obviously Islam is on the rise in terms of numbers and in terms of popularity and whatnot. But yeah, maybe that's something we can approach and think about.
Of course. So there's actually a relation between. I was studying this. So there's a philosophical concept by Selfridges.
Yeah.
It's called the pandemonium model. So this model basically it talks about. I'm sure you must have heard about the conflicts between the church and religiosity back in the day.
Yeah.
And so that resulted in anything and everything that was unknown to them, that they would call that thing a demon. So as an example, when you learn about vision sciences, they have many, let's say, drawings of the brain and of the eye, and then if they don't understand what certain neurons are or the names of the neurons or what they're doing, they just draw pictures of demons in that area and say, okay, this is unknown, so we're just going to call this area the demon. So the unknown was called the demon.
Right.
Now, many a times, the same concept comes to us over here. Like, haven't you heard this before? Let's say, many times we're told not to play with a scissor. Why? Because shaitan sits on the scissor. Or like, let's say, kids are told that make sure you fold the musalla or the prayer mat, basically, when you stand up. Why? Otherwise, shaitan's going to pray on it. So by all means, bismillah, you should leave it open in that, if that's the case. But, you know, the concept of the shaitan and the demon is even passed down to Islam. You know, so many times when and the niyyah, the intention is all good. You know, the parent was probably trying to teach the child discipline, right? But they didn't know what reason to give, so they're like, don't make sure that you fold it, otherwise shaitan's going to pray on it.
Can I ask, do you have children by chance?
I know.
No, inshallah khair. We wish all the best for you in your future. Sayyid Ali and I are getting old, well, especially myself. So, alhamdulillah, we've got a few children between us. And maybe one thing, Sayyid, obviously your children are a lot older than mine, but maybe one thing we've maybe learned over the last few years is that it's a lot easier said than done, especially for me, myself. So it's very easy for me in my younger years to maybe criticize my parents or our elders in our community to say, oh, we were told do this and don't do this, and without reasoning, without context. I think as we've gotten older, maybe it's something we've learned that experience is wisdom.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like you said, the niyyah is safia. Yeah. We've got a good intention, a pure intention, and it's hard for youth to bridge the gap between what I'm being told and why I'm being told to do it.
Yeah.
And it's the parents' job in many times to actually do that filling of the gap for them and to say, this is why I'm telling you to do it.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm doing? You see what I'm getting to?
I do, because especially kids, they always they're always like curious and they have questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I think they're too young for you to tell them, for example, the concept of hell. I generally believe sometimes they're too young. You can tell them that this is right and wrong. For example, like my daughter once asked me, she's turning 6 very soon,
MashaAllah.
and it was literally the other day, why do I have to do a specific thing?
Yeah.
And this was about covering up, by the way.
Yeah.
We were on holiday. And, you know, I didn't want to tell her, if you don't, this is what the result is, because number one, I thought that's not the approach to take here. Number two, she's too young for her to understand, or she might see as, you know, that sounds a bit evil, which technically it isn't. So I just told her, you know, when you do this, number one, she sort of understands who Allah is in a very basic level. So I told her, like, the more you listen, the more rewards you start to accumulate.
Yeah.
And then you reap them as you grow older. So this is like sort of the idea I've given her. And it leads to the question that you have,
nice.
you know, for example, let's say they're kids. And if I tell them, you know, that you're going to end up in hell if you don't do a certain thing.
Yeah.
They're going to grow up thinking, my God is evil.
Yeah.
Sorry to use this word.
No, you're
Yeah.
right.
But this
They
is
could
how they
traumatize
will
them.
understand and indirectly traumatize their mindset and thinking of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is.
Yeah. So as an example, like, you know, we were talking about the whole thing of the action and the consequence. I think so. Sheikh Jawad Shamali very beautifully mentions it in his book about the commentary on Dua Abu Hamza Somali. And he says that the first line, Ilahi la tu'addibni bi'uqubatik. Don't give, you know, consequences. Like, as an example, if your one strand is showing, one hair is out, khalas, you're going to be hung on the day of judgment. So this is a common punishment, that you're going to be hung with your hair.
I've heard upside down.
That's
I
the
don't
one.
know if you've heard
or
that.
if you listen to music, they will melt and
rods.
iron. That's the one. I love it. We know this. It's like classics. But now imagine a little child, let's say 6-year-old, is listening to this concept. In her mind, it's this God of wrath, and he's waiting with iron rods and, like, you know, ropes and stuff. But so interestingly, there was a course that I recently attended on Mahdawiya, and that course was teaching, or they spoke about this 3-step methodology as to how can you get a child to do an action or perform something without forcing them. So even if you're not there tomorrow, they won't be like, okay, fine, like, thank God my parent is not there, I don't need to do it. So the 3-step method that was mentioned was, number 1, teach them, give them the knowledge. Tell them that, look, these are the advantages and these are the disadvantages. Instead of telling them that, look, you need to do wudu like this, water needs to reach over here, this, now go do it. Tell them that, look, if you put water from this specific area to this specific area, it causes the nerves over here to basically, like, the cold water causes the nerves to awaken, and it wakes you up as well, making you ready for the salah that you're about to pray. So number 1 is education or knowledge. Give them the knowledge. Number 2 is automatically after that knowledge will follow the love for that knowledge. So they'll want to, let's say, as an example, come to the Husayni after you tell them or explain to them the advantages.
If you take that route, though, you're gonna have to expect a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Mama, why is this? Baba, why is that?
Yeah. So again, it comes. Yeah, it comes with his challenges as well. But then again, what you're thinking is that you're raising a generation who's not. You're raising your kids, and then you can let go of them, knowing that tomorrow I will not have to worry that, oh no, I'm not there, or I've sent my child to study, let's say, abroad.
We can sort of trust them that you've given them the correct upbringing, environment, and understanding of faith. Yeah.
Exactly. And then the last step is basically after love will follow the action. So that's knowledge, love, and then the action.
I think there's understanding Allah SWT is something which we can attempt to do for 80, 90 years in our life.
Yeah.
Inshallah, Allah gives us long lives. But even at that end point, you still may not have grasped the concept of a deity and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and all of the attributes that we see manifested in the day, in the days we live in and the days we walk on this earth. And then at the point where we're ready to leave this world, we've still not kind of grasped the concept of it. It's important for us to understand that basically as youth, understanding God is not an easy thing. And even as parents, teaching what God is, or as teachers or whatever, it's not an easy thing to express. It's a process which takes decades in many cases. But I think there has to be like a balance in giving slack, cutting them some slack in terms of understanding now when we get to a later age.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't mean the wrong thing, or maybe it wasn't the right approach, but maybe they meant well. I think in probably earlier generations, for many of our elders, it probably worked. But we live in a day and age now where society is built on...
They see a happier alternative.
Yeah,
alternative.
And there's a lot of sensitivities, let's be really honest, in this day and age. There's a lot of people get offended very easily in this day and age. And to be honest, sometimes it's trivial, but also sometimes people genuinely have a right to feel offended, and they have a right to justice. So because of that, people now understand and they introspect, and they look back at their younger years and they think, why was I taught to do this? I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Sayed Ali and I have talked about this in the past, but for example, when I was young, I remember in madrasa we had the best teachers, and we had like some teachers maybe were really good intention, had very good intentions, but maybe not the best practice. So for example, we were taught to do sajda, and I remember a specific teacher who would like hit us on our feet if our toes were not touching the floor or properly. And these kind of things are normal, or were normal back in the day.
Yeah.
And that teacher, may Allah bless him, may not remember it many years later, but to the students, of course, it's embedded in our memory. Yeah. And many times, if you take it in a good way, or maybe not a good way, but if you take it in a forgiving way, you understand to move on, and you understand maybe he meant the right thing.
Yeah.
But I think we have to take it with a pinch of salt.
Of course.
Because it can be very traumatic in many cases. Like you do get some really messed up abuse of power.
Yeah.
Like I was listening to something today, and it was like you could have trauma from work, you could have trauma in family life, but religious trauma is completely different, because religion is your identity. Yes. Like if your boss tells you failed, you're gonna be upset, but it's not the end of the world. You can leave your job.
Go get another job.
Yeah. But if someone tells you God's gonna make you be punished, and God, you failed God.
Khalas, done, finished.
You failed God. I failed God. What do I do now?
Yeah.
Like, what's the point of my existence? Right.
Exactly.
So it's adding another layer of complexity to your whole identity. It comes with religion, and it's something we have to take very carefully.
Of course, because like they say, religion is a way of life.
Yeah.
Right. So many of the comments, like you were mentioning, as an example, a few of them that I've heard very, very commonly is, let's say if there's a sister and her hair, her hair is showing, easily someone would be like, why are you even wearing the hijab? Like, take it off. If this much is khalas,
Do you not think that comes out of frustration?
You either wear it properly or you take it off.
or you take it off.
But do you not, if you don't mind me asking, because obviously we will never get this
Well, guys,
as men.
honestly,
And I have to
Yeah.
make that clear, because in the past, when we've spoken about women, Wallah al-Azim, God is our witness, we don't mean anything bad. And we love the effort and the jihad that our sisters do. But how do you approach that? So, for example,
Yeah.
if I'm a father and I
Yeah.
have a daughter,
Yeah.
and my daughter's, I tell her again and again and again and
Yeah.
again, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And eventually, obviously, anger or impatience gets the better of someone. And they say, why are you wearing it? If you're not even going to wear it properly, what's
Yeah.
the point?
Yeah.
How does one approach that? So in that specific case on hijab, because I'm sure a lot of sister stories that revolve around religious trauma.
Yeah.
It's mainly
Are related to
associated
hijab.
to
Of course, of course.
So how do we kind of
Physical
address that?
hijab, social hijab, so many different types of hijab. So just to get your question right, is it how to approach, let's say, if there's a young girl who's not wearing hijab properly, or let's say someone who's made this comment towards her?
From the perspective of someone who's trying to give the advice,
Yeah.
instead of impacting them in such a way which they may deem to be traumatic,
Yeah.
how does one approach it in a correct situation? So if you see hijab not being worn properly,
Yeah.
how do you then educate
Advise.
in the right way, advise in the right
Yeah.
way?
This is an interesting
The amr bil
question.
ma'ruf
Yeah.
type of support which we're told to do. How do you
Yeah.
enjoin good
Yeah.
on someone?
So as an example, something that, well, let's say my mom really tried to encourage when I was growing up is to have a role model. To know, like, as an example, look, and then remind them of the role model. That, look, do you think this person would ever dress up this way? If you think so, okay, fine. And then give them an opinion as well. That you tell me, you talk to me. Instead of you do this, like the Matilda sort of mindset. Like, you are this, you are that. No. They also want a voice.
Make
And
them part of it. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
As young as they are, the more you give them respect, the more, they feel respected and they
Yeah.
feel like they have a voice. So I feel like, and there's even an interesting hadith that says that whoever you take as a role model, you will be, on the day of judgment, you will be
Associated
raised
with them, yeah.
next to that person.
MashaAllah.
So imagine like
Yeah.
taking, I don't know, like there's so many examples. Imagine taking, and not like, of course we should be taking or giving, let's say, giving examples of role models such as Sayyidah Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, or let's say Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam. But we should also give them role models of people at this day and age who they can relate to. Who if they
Yeah.
have questions, they can ask, they can write letters, they can write emails, messages. So, at least they can reach out to that person more actively. And then, of course, this person that they have now in this day and age will link them back eventually to...
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. And maybe we can apply that to different things.
Yeah.
Not just hijab, but really many other things. I remember when I was young, my mum used to tell me every time I got angry, she said, your name's Ahmed Abbas. And she goes, remember Abu Fadl Abbas, alayhi salam, because that's my second
Yeah,
name.
of
So she'd
course.
say, remember how he would swallow his anger
Yeah.
and channel his energy, his anger,
Yeah.
into love and into defense of his family and defense
Yeah.
of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
And there's probably so many examples that we can apply with a similar context and looking at a role model.
Of course. That's...
Because I wanted to ask, before the podcast, I
Yeah.
asked you, do you have any experience in this field when
Yeah.
it comes to religious trauma? And you said you did, and you have some examples.
Yeah.
Can you share some with us?
Of course. So, all right. So I'll start with an example of religious trauma that I experienced. So my mom got me into, let's say, public speaking since a young age, since the age of around 6 years old. And I used to deliver lectures, do public speaking. But there was this one phase, there was a few good years where I stopped public speaking. I became more of I'd shy away from even speaking in the public. And that's all because there was this one day after I delivered a lecture, which is approximately when I was 9 to 10 years old.
We're talking
And-
about Islamic lectures here.
Yes.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was approximately 9 to 10 years old, and this auntie came up to me after one of the lectures, and she's like, that was well done, etc. And then she was like, but make sure that you practice what you preach, because you know what Imam Mahdi will do when he's here. I think she said either Imam Ali or Imam Mahdi. She's like, he will cut off the heads of whoever does not practice what they preach.
Oh my God.
And imagine, this is 9-year-old me looking up at that auntie, and I was almost about to cry. I was like, oh my God, my head's gone. Finish, khalas, like this is it. I'm not public speaking anymore. And so even when I wanted to, socialize or talk to people about anything, I'd be like, oh my God, my head. Thinking of it from the perspective of a 9-year-old,
Because you imagine, when you're very young, you imagine everything.
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
trying to
Or let's
picture
say
it.
when in majalis, you know, they speak or they narrate the fada'il of Imam Ali, or let's say what will Imam Mahdi would do when he comes. They say that he will come with his sword and he will, you know, like kill these people, and he will, you know, the blood, and the way they describe it.
That's true. You know, we had a
I
previous
knew you were gonna
podcast
mention
here
it.
Yeah.
with brother Imran, and,
Yeah.
and I said a point where I was like, you know, everyone imagines like the return of Imam al-Mahdi
Yeah.
ta'ala faraja as, you know, there's going to be fights and wars and everyone's against each
Yeah.
other, but it's a joyous return. Yani we should be
Exactly.
happy
Yeah.
and, you know, preparing for it.
Exactly. So there's this, and then again, there was once when on Ashur, so my nephews were over, and we were, you know, going through different channels, and there was this one where this Molana, like he was, he was basically narrating the story of what happened on Ashur, and he was screaming and shouting, like, you know, there was so much going on. And these little kids, they were looking at, you know, the TV, and they're like, whoa,
Chaos.
what? Yeah, so they're like, what is he saying? Like, one of them was like, he left the room, he's like, what is this? This is scary. What's wrong with this man, is what he asked. Then we changed the other channel, and it came to, I'm sure you must have heard of Sheikh Ali Radhawi.
Yeah.
Yeah, so his lectures. And the way he was, like, you know, the way he was narrating and the way he was delivering, it was so beautiful. They actually wanted to come, sit and listen to what he was saying.
Nice.
So now imagine the difference. The same kids go to different majalis, the same, like, what, it's commonsensical.
They both have the same message. It's just
Exactly.
how they give that message.
Yeah. Now people become defensive at times. They're like, no, it's the Josh, you know, like you should, but think of it practically. You know, like, what are you passing on? Do you really want yourself to just say a few words and people are like, wah, 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 get off the member and it's gone, finish?
Yeah.
Or people to take actual lessons that, yes, okay, this happened. From Ashura, it's not only about crying, but it's about taking lessons from each and every individual.
It's important, I think, as well to understand that, like, there's something I've been thinking about recently, and that's
Yeah.
the concept of human values,
Yeah.
which are not solely taught through religion, that humans should pass on from parent to child. Now, stay with me for this, because
Yeah.
I might sound like I'm waffling. I usually do, but but basically, I'll tell you what I mean by this.
Words of wisdom.
There's not at all. There's values which Islam teaches, which are not solely Islamic, but they are good moral human values.
Yeah.
Patience, sabr, even, for example, social hijab and
Yeah.
modesty and whatnot. Now, I have this belief that, this is my own opinion, I think a parent has two responsibilities. If we're not even talking about Islam, we're talking about just the job of a human and its child.
Yeah.
The first responsibility is to provide it with safety and protection. I mean, shelter over its head, food on the table, and so on. Protection. The second is to teach it good human morals. Now, for example, I was at the hospital the other day, and I was with my wife, and there was a male doctor. And obviously, being a guy, and
Yeah.
there's a male doctor, my wife is here, there's a sense of protectionism you feel as a guy, defense mode and whatnot.
Yeah.
Okay, ghira. Now, I noticed that doctor, who is definitely not Muslim,
Yeah.
had a fantastic approach to his social hijab. He didn't make eye contact with my wife. He looked at me. If you're speaking to my wife, he looked down. And some might feel like that's a bit weird, but as a husband and as a Muslim male, I appreciated that.
Yeah.
I really, really appreciated that. And when I left, I told my wife, I said, that's exactly what I mean. You do not have to be a Muslim to know
Exactly.
basic morals, but Islam enforces and perfects those morals. So
Yeah.
the fine tuning is done with religion.
Yeah.
Now, where I'm getting to this is examples should be led by Muslims.
Exactly.
We should be it's very easy in many cases to go to a clinic and you see Mr. Khan, who's 60 years old, and he's like the weirdest guy, and there's a young sister in hijab, and you get me. I'm not going to go into too much details, but you
Yeah.
get some very awkward situations
Yeah.
from Muslims, and in comparison, you have other guys who are not Muslim. But we should lead by example, okay? And specifically when it comes to things like hijab, and I mean for the male and the female in our community, and more so, for example, when it comes to education, because education is defining in terms of what we then pass on. We live in an era now which our parents never had to go through,
Yeah.
and that is education virtually, and the fact that we can educate people millions of miles away, and not literally millions, but pass on information, shape people's narratives and their mindsets towards the world. And in many cases, that's why, for example, a podcast like After Maghrib or your podcast, Baraza Banter, has such a massive responsibility to speak goodness and to actually be careful about what we're saying. because at the end of the day, we don't want people in 10 years' time to be like, yeah, when I was 13, I used to hear this random guy on a podcast talk about Imam Hussein and say, look, all the people who don't follow Shiism are going to go to hell. No, that's not the right approach. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people do that. And there's an easy way to fall into a trap of being like condescending. You mentioned this phrase said to me earlier, holier than thou. What do you mean by that?
I was talking to you because I was trying to understand the definition behind it. I didn't end up searching the definition.
Holier than thou?
Yeah.
Holier than thou, those are people who look down on others, right? And as in they talk about, I mean, they see themselves
like
as...
they'll practice something or they preach something and then they wouldn't practice what they preach. I think that's the definition.
So I think one of the, let's say, the examples that one of the stories that came to us on the podcast is one of the sisters said, I absolutely, like, I've stopped going to mosque because I do not understand why our speakers, all they do is they sit on the minbar and let's say they talk about how, you know, as an example, the Prophet had multiple wives, or let's say how, as an example, they shout and they scream. And it's these, like, they don't explain the point fully. You know, they leave it over there and then they expect the wahwa to come, finish, wrapped up, and khalas. You know, the majlis is gone. So is the speaker finished. There's no way you can contact the speaker. And so they don't, like, you know, you wouldn't ever expect a trauma or let's say a misunderstanding to come from someone who sits on the minbar and, you know, gives but many times that's where it comes from. So we essentially divided, like we came up with, we're like, okay, fine. What are a few reasons or what are a few main root causes for these traumas? And a few that we came up with is, as an example, let's say one is community, the other one is education, and then we have family as well. So you know how you were mentioning earlier that many times family, like, you know, you think, how is it, you know, someone listening to this point could be like, okay, how are you implying that I, let's say, am the cause of my daughter's religious trauma? Think about what are you teaching her? How are you, when she's doing something, how are you reacting to it? So one of the stories that came to us is, let's say there was a sister who said that it was the day of Ashur and she wasn't feeling too well. So she told her mom that, look, you know, I'd love to come, but I'm not feeling too well. So is it okay if I don't come? She's like, no, you know, you still have to come. She's like, okay, fine. So she accompanied her family. You know, they were sitting they reached the mosque. Everyone got out of the car, and she said, she's like, I really cannot, you know, come. Can I please just sit in the car and I listen to the speakers? Is that okay? So mom got off the car and she looks at her and she's like, you know what? Imam Hussein purposely made you sick today. She's like, why? She's like, because he didn't want you to come to the mosque. Look at your hijab. Like, look at the way you're not feeling well today. That's why, like Imam Hussein did this. Now imagine, if this does not result in trauma, then what is it? And we need to address this. Like, there's a beautiful hadith that says that, it says that basically, so it says that someone السائر على غير بصيرة I'll quote it in English because I can't remember the Arabic quite accurately right now, but basically someone who walks on a path without basira, without insight, is like السائر على غير الطريق. يعني you're walking, you don't know what path, you don't know enough about the path that you're walking on, right? لا يزيده كثرة المشي إلا بعد. يعني you're walking towards that place, but it's not resulting in anything but your distance. Like you're not getting you're getting further and further away from the place. So you're thinking that, look, I'm getting closer, but you're really just on a treadmill. And in fact, you're going, you know, further away from that place just because you don't know where you're going. So yes, all these preachings are there, you know, and they're important. And you might see that, okay, short term, it's making an impact on the youth. Short term, they're listening to you, like, you know, strictly. Like back in the day, it was the moms pinching from the back, you know, during the majlis to sit up straight, or the dads. Short term, okay, fine. You know, everyone sat straight.
I think a community which is facilitating for questions is a community which is strong.
Yeah.
So if we live in a day and age where if someone's got a genuine question, they could be 5 years old, like your daughter said, for example, she's 5 years old, she has a question on why she has to do a certain thing when you travel, or they might be 15, or they might be 45, or however old they are, and if they approach a person of knowledge, it could be their parents, it could be a community member, it could be a sheikh, and as long as our community is facilitating and caters for questions, we're moving forward as a community. But the minute we become restrictive of a question, there's a problem there. Now, look, I'll be really blunt. There are so many people on different ideological spectrums just within the community. Even if we're talking about the Khoja community, which you and I reside in, even in our community, you have the left and the right. You have the pluralists and you have the purists, and you've got everything in between.
Yeah.
All right. Now, in my humble opinion, asking questions is cool. Because if your pure niyyah is to find haqq and to find tawheed and to find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the answers are there.
Yeah.
And if we search for truth, we will find it.
Yeah.
Okay? There's a reason why Imam Ali said saluni, saluni, is because he wanted people to engage in questions and answers.
Yeah.
And then you get some idiot guy who says, how many hairs are on my head? And that's a classic example of using the opportunity of people who are of knowledge and wasting their time and wasting your own time. Like, when we have people of knowledge, we should be seeking out the right answers. But the minute you say, no, you can't ask a question, or if the guy asks a question, he's mushrikeen and he's munafiqeen and he's this and that, then there's a problem.
Yeah.
So asking a question is cool. But again, I have to be honest with you, I think there's got to be a balance, because you will get people who will ask questions which are past the line of normalist. You know, they're
What do you mean?
For example, Said, let me give you an example. If you are someone who asks questions for the sake of being the devil's advocate or causing fitna and trying to stir people up or trying to start arguments, and you get people like that in every community, get out, bro. You're not welcome here, because those sorts of people are not relevant, unfortunately. They would just cause problems. And then, of course, you get people who genuinely want to know. Like, you know, we talk about concepts which unfortunately are very debated in our communities. Tawassul, we're talking in our group chat today. People criticize the concept of tawassul. All right,
No names.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Fine.
Yeah.
So there's chains of narrations, and there's ahadith there, and there's books there, and some of our major books will authenticate it.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about tawassul from an academic perspective, bismillah.
Go for it. Yeah.
But if you're a youngster and you're just saying tawassul is this and that, and you man are worshipping imams and you're just causing problems, then that's not productive engagement.
Exactly.
So you might, and then you'll come back and be like, no, I've been traumatized by my community because they forced me to believe in concepts of tawassul.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's got to be a give
But I
and
have
a take.
a question though.
Go on.
So as an example, let's say someone comes up to you and says that, okay, so I have this, you know, these questions about tawassul, and fires away with the questions.
Right.
And let's say it's causing this a little bit of a friction within the community. Do you think that person should completely be taken out of the community and khalas, like, you know, these people should not, like, this person should, like you said, like, take them out? Do you think that this person shouldn't be contacted, or let's say we shouldn't listen to their ideologies more, or khalas, or should they just be like...
Very, very good question. I guess obviously it's case by case in many circumstances, but I think one should engage in conversation to the point where when someone's...
I think even the questions that arise out of fitna.
But specifically, for example, if someone's asking questions for the sake of wanting to learn, that's different than projecting viewers
But
forward.
then there's been preachers who take that path and just, it goes so far extreme that I think you just have to, something has to be done about it, because
that's exactly what I'm getting to. Like, that's exactly what I mean. Like, you'll get people who project views forward to the point
I'm sure
where...
if it's dialogue where it's just you're discussing, learning, whatever, it's fine.
But you get people who will project views to the community, and it will become threatening to the mainstream.
Yeah.
Whether that's good or bad is a different conversation. But the idea is that whenever anything overlaps or conflicts with what
There's a lot of preachers now that we have that.
Yeah. Like, if something conflicts or contradicts usul and furu' ad-din and what our madhab says and what our ahadith say, what the Quran says, then we have a problem.
Yeah.
So then at that stage, our community leaders need to work out a responsibility. How do you engage with such people? I'm talking about people asking questions rather than projecting views.
Yeah.
Although obviously a lot of the time questions arise because you have speakers or people who have done some learning who will project those views, and that will result in people asking questions. Do you get what I'm saying?
One of my favorite hadith that sort of helps me with this is that, because many a times, like, you know, a few of my favorite speakers that I used to listen to earlier on, and then now when I listen to their majalis or lectures, I'm like, wait, but, like, you know, just thinking of it logically, it doesn't make sense, like what you're saying. So one of Imam Ali's, like, one of my favorite hadith from Imam Ali, that he says, "Arif al-haq, ta'rif ahla," or basically identify what the haq is, and then you follow.
Yes,
so it was even the context that this hadith came from, like, you know, it was
the truth and then go to those.
Exactly, the Battle of Jamal, you know, like that man. So the man that came to Imam Ali to ask him this question, he was so confused because on one end he had people who he thought as, you know, his role models, and then Imam Ali, you know, his role models. So he's like, what is going on? And this, you know, it's so practical because it'll happen again and again and again in our day-to-day lives as well. So you need to identify that. Look, okay, forget about who I've been following. You think, okay, what is the haqq? and make that your mizan, basically, or
Yeah.
you know, make that your clear differing factor, your barometer. That look, this is the truth. Is this person following? Okay, I'm gonna follow. Don't be scared to follow. Or if, let's say, because it was a trait of Imam Ali that the whole world would be on one side, but Ali on the other side, right? So really try to see that, look, this is the haqq. I'm gonna follow this, regardless of X, Y, Z, the Shaykh or the Mulana that I've been following. Is he following it or no? And then later on, because Allah doesn't, you know, it's like he'll look at your niyyah and the effort that you've made, you know. He won't be like, oh, you know, you've went and you did not follow this sheikh, but you followed that sheikh. No, minus points. You know, he'll look at the fact that you've made an effort. And he's really not the God of wrath. Like, he's really out there to give us the plus points rather than the minus points.
Yeah, that's fair.
No,
So that's one hadith that helps me. And then I'm like, okay, fine. This is the haqq. Is this person following or no? I am at least following. So on the day of judgment, at least I can say that, look, I did my best.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
want to bring the conversation back a bit to our speakers. And, you know, I respect all our
Say
speakers out
before
there.
you move
Go
on, the other side of the coin of what you mentioned of what was the phrase?
Heads or tails?
Holier than thou.
Holier than thou.
Yeah.
Is I think people who have a pious individuals who abuse their power, who they're preaching one thing.
Want to talk about this.
Well, I just wanted to touch on this briefly
Yeah.
because I was going to say, you know, we have a lot of speakers, and God bless all of them because they all do the same job, and that's
Yeah.
inshallah, you know, preaching Islam and taking us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But sometimes the way that they preach or say something, and then off the pulpit they come do something else.
Yeah.
I know many people who have given up on mosques, being part of the community.
I don't think
Giving up praying.
It's tackling the individuals maybe in those positions.
because they blame
Main
these people.
institution.
No, but
from
rather,
institutional.
it's something that has affected a lot of people in our community. So, يعني, what I forgot where I wanted to go with this, but what do these certain individuals need to do, like, to overcome that?
Oh, there's a lot of people who have left.
Because there's no way we can avoid this happening. If someone's
Well,
a
we
good
should be
speaker,
avoiding this
if
happening.
someone's a good speaker,
Yeah.
naturally they're going to end up with a good position, whether they're pious or not. Does that make sense? Unfortunately, this has led to those people who get traumatized by this, to being inspired by people who they shouldn't be inspired by because they can't look up to those people anymore.
Yeah.
So they're looking up to, I don't know, young ads or Aki Ayman or what's the Australian guy called? The guy who shouts on the
Hoblos.
mic, Hoblos. These guys,
I know
as
what
in
you mean.
they're
Yeah,
amazing at speaking, but they're not very.
They're orators, but their akhlaq and their
Hey,
adab
it's not ideal to look up to.
And bro, to be honest, a lot of people have left our communities because either the preachers or even just community members don't display the akhlaq, which is that of the Ahlul Bayt al-Muslim.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a lot of people who have said, oh, I don't go to that community because they're holier than thou. Or they're like that. You know how many people have said this to me about certain centers or certain
Yeah.
communities? When I go in, I don't feel welcome. Literally, I was at a wedding on Sunday. A guy said to me, mashallah, he's a brother, but he has a slight impairment. He's slightly disabled. He said to me, when I go to a specific community, no names, he goes, I don't feel welcome and I feel everyone looks down on me. And I'm thinking, Wallah al-Azim, that's so sad. It's really sad. Like, this guy, he's got nothing, he's not doing anything to anyone. Like, he's
Yeah.
walked into a center, he just wants to worship and go home.
Oh, and a lot of this religious trauma is how people judge us.
Yeah.
Because they think they're better than us.
Yes.
Or for example, we think we are doing it more right, or we have a say over, you know, if you're doing something wrong, well, first, and there's been times where when I was a kid, well, not really a kid, when I was possibly 13, 14,
Yeah.
15, if someone was to tell you off, they would not, you know, take you nicely to a corner,
Yeah.
advise you. They do it in
In
front
front
of
of everyone.
Sometimes in front of your dad.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, it makes you not want to come back to the mosque again.
Sorry,
Exactly.
sister, I know you've probably got so much to say.
No,
I just
go
want to
for it.
mention something. This point you mentioned is really important, and there's two things that come to mind. One is the hadith that our dear brothers from Ahl Sunnah love to remind us by Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, when they were young, and obviously the way they taught the man to do wudu in such a fashion which maybe they couldn't take him to the side because obviously they had to do wudu in a specific place. But their manner of showing someone etiquette and the akhlaq that they had was amazing.
Yeah.
Like you said about leading by example. The second thing as well is you mentioned about this doing it in front of everyone. Bro, something came to my mind just now. You know, when I was young, I was probably 13, just become baligh and all of that. And I remember I was doing sajda and my head was down, my hands were on the floor. Some guy next to me started pushing my elbow.
To fix
Right?
it, yani.
No. He was just pushing my elbow. I was like, what is going on? So After namaz, we're sitting there. We've done our Allahu Akbar 3 times. I said to him, I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I wanted to see if you're concentrating to see if you push me back. I was like, bro,
While he's praying.
While he's praying, I was like, you're asking me if I'm concentrating. Why are you doing that to me? So, and I'm thinking now, many years later, I remember that this guy tried to test me when I was a 13-year-old. And in front of everyone, there's probably 500 people praying Jama'ah together. And this guy in front of everyone was still seated in the lines. He's telling me, I wanted to test you, so I started pushing you during the namaz.
Well, a few years ago, I landed at Najaf Airport.
Okay.
And when you come out of Najaf Airport, there's like a small place for you to pray. It's not really a mosque. At the time, now it's a bit different. So there was, restrooms where you can go to wudu. And I remember going in doing wudu, and I looked at the place, I was like, this place is a disaster. Like, how can anyone do wudu here? So I'm trying to be as quick as I can. Next thing I finished my wudu, there was a man. For me, I think he was wearing a turban, but at the time of his wudu, he had taken it off because he was wearing everything else for it. And then he was like, your whole wudu is incorrect. I was shocked. I was like, what? I was like, well, I've been doing wudu like this for the last 25 years of my life.
Yeah.
What have I done wrong? He was like, you did that once, you were supposed to do it twice. I was like, no, this is mustahab.
Yeah.
Now he's having an argument with me in front of everyone. I was there and I was like,
no way.
Should I answer this guy back?
Yeah.
Or should I just say thank you? And I just thank you and left. But I was like, if I didn't have, patience then and there, and I was someone else, I'm like, you're a Maulana.
Yeah.
And you're telling me off in front of everyone. Yeah. On top of it, it's wrong what you're telling me off with.
Yeah.
It's the holier than thou. It's
exactly.
the thing I'm trying to say.
So the example about mustahab as well, there's this once when I was attending one of the majalis in Muharram, and we used to have basically like fiqh sessions. So like someone comes and explains fiqh rules. And someone from the audience asked the speaker that, why do we do mustahab act? And the speaker says, well, it's to make Allah happy. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm just trying to think of mustahab acts. Like, as an example, how is me putting water twice making Allah happy? Or how is, let's say, me doing masah of more toes, like how there's, like the mustahabat. Well, as an example, I'm just trying to, I'm like, how is this answer?
I think it's a bit of a blanket statement, though. Like, for example, some things like wipe your arms twice, that might be ihtiyat. Yeah. For example, it's mustahab to do precautionary act. Exactly. But obviously, in other things, mustahab salat al-layl. Yeah. For example. Yeah. That stuff will make Allah happy. Yeah. You're not doing it out of ihtiyat.
Exactly.
But yeah, you're right. It's that, for example, answers.
Yeah.
It's not
so say, yes, it will make Allah happy, but how? Yeah. Like, as an example, if there's a youth in the audience, this person's going to think that, okay, what? Like, am I really sitting over here? And I want to learn something, and this person's telling me, like, giving me such answers, I'd, of course, rather than go to these influencers, and they have much more to offer. This person's teaching me how to invest in the latest stocks as well. Like, why am I sitting over here? Automatically, those answers come, and they have all the rights. Like, as an example, one of the other stories that came in, the sister used the word hate with a few, like, big personalities that we have, like, hate towards them, because of the way they were introduced to her in her life. Right. So as an example, that Allah is Allah's going to punish you like this and like that. Da, 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 da. So of course she's like, then I started hating the concept of a God or a higher power. Then she's like, you know what? Then this line comes in. Like, you know what? I'm going to hell anyways. I'd rather enjoy my life properly.
If you're saying I'm going to hell anyway, I've done the haram,
bro, you've got to be careful. Like, there's certain ulama who specialize in talking about death and barzakh and afterlife.
They're called the Maulana Malik al-Maut.
Malik al-Maut. And we know we're probably thinking of the same guy. But nonetheless, there are ulama and there are speakers who specialize in talking about death.
Yeah.
And then there are speakers who are saying, no, God is a God of love and only love. Bro, I have friends who will tell me that I don't need to worry because I know Allah knows I've tried my hardest, or I've tried to do what I can, and I don't need to worry about the afterlife. And then you got the other ones who say, no, everything you do, like the sheikh you met in Najaf, everything you do is wrong and you got to do it 3 times over and make sure. Yeah. I don't think either is correct. We have to understand that Allah is a God of love, but equally He's a God of Jabbar. And He's a God of wrath, and He is a God of. I'm going to disagree with you on a personal level.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, He is a God of love, but He's also a God of justice.
Yes.
How can one be merciful and just at the same time? Because justice implies no bias. Do you see what I'm saying? If I'm just to someone, I'm giving them their fair share and what's equally right and just towards them. But if I'm merciful to someone, I'm being lenient to them and I'm giving them more than what they're due.
Yeah.
Allah is merciful through that justice.
Yeah.
And that punishment, that adab that Allah gives us is His mercy.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
And that justice is part of our usul ad-din, by the way.
100%. Yeah. 100%.
Adala,
Adala of
adala,
Allah
yeah,
is
yeah.
like, it's clear as day. So I don't think I don't think we should escape it. I think we should just be nuanced in the way we discuss it.
Yeah.
And like, for example, we talk about this on the podcast, a specific analogy we always mention, the injection, the vaccination analogy. You take your kid who's a 1-year-old to get a vaccine when they turn 1, they're baffled. Why is my parent who I love and I love respect so much, why are they making my arm hurt? I'm crying and I'm in pain. You don't know that your parent is doing this for your own protection against chickenpox and swine flu and COVID and whatnot, for example. But in the same way, when we talk about Allah, we shouldn't scare people away from God.
Yeah.
I think but we should approach Allah's mercy and His justice in the same way we do for each other.
Yeah.
There has to be equality in the way we talk about Allah, because at the end of the day, Allah deserves that from us. You know, we're nothing.
Yeah.
Talking about Allah itself is an honor. And if we slip in the way we talk about Allah, then we will be punished. It's
Yeah.
a fact.
Of course.
You know, and the onus and the responsibility is on us to be careful about how we talk about God. But to dismiss some of God's qualities and to say like there might be speakers or there might be authors or whatever who focus on God being the God of love, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I think we don't want to brainwash society and say, no, it's okay. Hijab is, you don't have to give it 100% because God loves you. It's cool. Do you get me? Because we can fall into a trap of people becoming desensitized to Allah.
Yeah.
And do you get where I'm coming from?
Well, yeah.
I think a good word to sorry, were you about
No,
to say
please.
that? So a good word that explains is, let's say, the over time the change in the definition of taqwa, let's say.
Right.
So the taqwa was defined earlier as fearing God, right? But nowadays the true definition of it is really becoming more, let's say, available to everyone and is being clarified. So the definition of taqwa is loving God so much that you fear to disobey Him. So you don't fear Him
Out of His punishment.
yeah.
Rather,
you fear to, it's like as the relation that you have with your parents, right? You're like, oh my God, my mom's coming. You're like, is my room cleaner? You think, okay, I love her so much. Would I want her to come and be like, really, like, you know, I do all this for you?
You don't want to disappoint your parents. Yeah.
So have that relation of love. So the bunyad should still be love, but on that love following up, would you ever want to hurt someone that you love? No. So I think that is what taqwa really is. And then this is the message that should be shared, essentially, that the punishment, of course, it's there. We deserve that. So I think, you know, what you were mentioning about the Asma Allah, what's important is that even as an example, when we teach the names of Allah, we shouldn't just teach it that, okay, As'aluka ya man hu, like, you know, the track that we always remember. And, you know, we make everyone, like the kids always memorize it. It shouldn't just be a track that you memorize. You should do, يعني تخلقوا بأسماء الله. So you basically become that name of Allah for one day. So a project that I was thinking of recently, I was like, how amazing would it be, as an example, to, let's say, come up with something whereby before the child leaves, you know, their house for school, they pick a chit and they're like, okay, today I need to do takhalluq of the Ism al-A'zam, of Ism Allah ar-Rahman.
Yeah.
So the whole day today, I am ar-Rahman. Then no matter, you know, what may come, this is who I am.
Mercy.
Or let's say today I am al-Quddus or as-Salam. So I will be the source of peace. So these names shouldn't just be taught as, okay, fine, khalas, the name, I've memorized it. No, you become the name.
As in trying to, you know, implement the attributes in our actions. In our,
Exactly. Because we're like an empty vessel through which God should echo.
Yeah.
Or as an example, we are like there's an ayah in the Quran that says, Sibghat Allah wa man ahsan min Allahi sibgha, right? The color of Allah. So how beautiful to dye yourself in the color of Allah. And that's what God, that is why He has created us, to see different aspects of Himself within us. So, but we look at Him as an outer concept. We don't look at Him as us. He is within us. He echoes within us. We are an empty vessel through which He echoes. But we see it as an outer concept. We see religion as that is religion, that is religious knowledge, and this is normal knowledge.
Sure.
Whereas in reality, any type of knowledge that takes you closer towards Allah is religious knowledge. So as an example, today that I'm studying optometry, I am shocked at how many things that I study about are literally like, you know, it's as if I'm studying aqaid.
Yes, yes.
Or as if I'm studying diniya, you know, because so leading on that, then a friend of mine and myself, so we made this page on Instagram that's called Ayat, and it's basically we try to relate day to day.
Verses?
Yes, yeah. So
Okay.
the ayat.
Okay.
Do you get
got it.
yeah. So basically, ayahs that are related to the eye are essentially practices that optometrists do on a day-to-day basis that should remind them of Allah.
That's very nice. Beautiful. What a niche.
So,
what a niche.
yeah.
Just before we wrap up, obviously, I know we're getting on and time is ticking. I've really enjoyed our discussion so far. I think there's definitely been a lot of angles to look at this, but I just want to share is we've received like a really long message from a sister. In fact, we've had loads of replies and messages. So firstly, like a huge thanks to everyone at home.
From the Instagram question.
From the Instagram question, we received dozens and dozens of responses. There's specifically one, I'm not going to read the whole thing out, but the gist of it, because it's like 3 or 4 long paragraphs, the gist of it is talking specifically about how this specific sister is upset how certain mothers would, and particularly she singles out Desi mothers, South Asian mothers, who would guilt trip their children and basically be told, you know, their children be told you're a non-religious person at such a young age. They talk about, for example, mothers telling their children, Allah will curse you, you're only 7 years old. And of course, you know, if someone goes, I also have heard my auntie say, my brother, that Allah will burn you in fire like kebabs. Like, of course, these kind
I
of
shouldn't
things
be
are...
laughing, but that's traumatic.
That, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, these kind of things will stay with at that age they're children, but in 30 years' time they're not children. And these kind of memories we all have,
They'll remember
Yeah.
them.
good and bad memories
Yeah,
from
yeah,
our
yeah.
young age. I think it's an important thing for us to say that at the end of the day, we are where we are, and we have practice and belief in our religion as a result of the tarbiyah that we had from our parents and our
Of course.
community.
Of
So our
course.
elders, our friends, our teachers have all contributed to make us who we are. Where we can improve is down to us now. Once we reach that stage of bulugh, and I genuinely feel that Allah has made that because we are then at an age to self-assess and do that muhasibah and all these things. It's now our job, you know. And like you said, sister, at the very beginning, what's the point of talking about something if we don't do anything? So action. I want to ask us kind of like a final question from myself, and then maybe Sayed has something after to say to you. But action-wise, what do you want to see from everyone at home? Because inshallah, there'll be hundreds of people who listen to you talk about this. What do you want to see from them?
So one thing that I would strongly recommend is when you listen to something for the first time, when you've, you know, like something that you're like, okay, does this make sense or does it not? Don't just dismiss it saying that, okay, this person is saying it, so it must be correct. Try to think of it and compare it to, let's say, the barometer of the haqq that you have. Okay. Because one of the biggest sources of, let's say, knowledge, one of the biggest sources of wahi, not wahi exactly, but basically a way that Allah speaks to us is through our fitrah.
Yeah.
So even like fitriyan or within you, innately, you'll feel that,
Our senses?
yeah, this doesn't really feel exactly right. So ask yourself, okay, does it not? Then research further. And because for all you know, it might be that the speaker 10 years later comes and says, I apologize
his
about
mind,
something that I
yeah.
said. But then you have based your entire life on this concept. Why?
Right.
Why? Because this person says it. Allah will on the day of judgment ask you that I created you. So I'm asking you why you did this action, not X, Y, and Z. That person has their own grave and their own a'mal. Right? لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينٍ. So whatever you hear and you're a little confused about it, do your own research and ask yourself, is this true or is this not? And I think that will really help in going forward instead of just being like, okay, this person said it, khalas.
No, beautiful.
Blindly following, basically.
No, it's very nice. Nice
I
reminder.
appreciate that.
Nice reminder. And I had something similar to this. And I think I'm not going to repeat it again. I've said it in previous podcasts. You know, when I'd listen to something off the pulpit, then I'll go double check it.
Yeah.
If it's something I haven't understood well, or, you know, felt like it sat well with the way I've been, you know, understanding or raised how religion is. But one thing I do want to mention is that, like you mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, people say God is beautiful. Ultimately, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beautiful and He likes beauty. And I think the beauty in this conversation is that we need to be beautiful in the way we advise people, the way we speak
Absolutely.
with them. Because, you know, at the end of the day, we know Allah shadid al-aqab. Like, it's impossible to know that there is a God and there's no justice. Yani, if we instill from a young age in our children, you know, for example, usul al-din, you know, tawheed, adala, that justice, or the fifth one, you know, mi'ad yawm al-qiyamah, like
Yeah.
we know there's accountability, there's hisab,
Of
uqtab, there's
course.
all of this. I think it will help this generation grow and move forward, rather than, you know, for example, be rebellious, or for example, say, you know what, she said this or he said that, or small learner doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
No, it's embedded in us from a very, very young age.
Yeah.
That when we grow up, and you mentioned very early on in the conversation, where you can teach your children, you can trust them as they grow, that you can sit back,
Yeah.
relax in a way.
That's the goal.
This is the
Yeah.
mentality that we need, not just from our parents, but from the pulpits, I think,
Of
and
course.
from the highest authorities in our communities.
Absolutely. And it all stems back to being, I think, around the right people. When we talk about, in the same way we talk about role models, we talk about friendship a lot on this podcast, and we talk about the right people to hang around with. And inshallah, we can advise each other and do the amr bil ma'roof and nahy anil munkar with each other in the right way.
Of course. Inshallah.
And yeah, I've gained a lot. So, sister, I just want to firstly thank you so much for
been
being
an honor,
here,
honestly.
for kind of getting in touch with us, and obviously for putting yourself forward to discuss this with us. And I just want to make this abundantly clear that Sister Zoha has brought something to After Maghrib in a concept we knew nothing about, but has affected us, and of course has enlightened us, educated us. And inshallah, we'll kind of take these into our own lives as parents, and inshallah, hopefully, refine and improve our own method of parenting and teaching and whatnot. So thank you very much. I really,
Thank you
really
very much.
appreciate it.
It has been an honor, and honestly, I've learned a lot as well.
I
Alhamdulillah.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We learned a lot.
Jazakallah khair.
Inshallah, I won't traumatize our children.
Hopefully our voices haven't traumatized the viewers either. Guys, just to wrap up, as usual, we are active online on social media, on YouTube as well. If you are not already subscribed to After Maghrib on YouTube, please hit that notification bell and hit that subscribe button so you know every single Thursday when we release a podcast, you're the first one to hear it. And obviously you can follow us on TikTok, on Instagram, and we're also on Twitter as well. We've also, of course, got our new show, Jum'ah Nights, which is under the After Maghrib franchise or the After Maghrib brand. So tune into that. It releases every Friday. So much of anything to add on to that? Because I know obviously we're working on that as a team.
Keep up with the After Maghrib universe.
Yeah.
Cinematic universe.
We're turning into Marvel, Metaverse.
And do follow Baraza Banter as well.
And follow
Yes.
Baraza Banter.
Yes.
Where can we find Baraza Banter online?
So that's at Baraza Banter Instagram, and then we have a YouTube as well.
And for the non-Khojas who are listening, what does
Yeah.
Baraza mean?
Baraza means post. How would you describe it actually? I'm interested from my perspective.
like
I want you to. Yeah, how would you describe it?
As an Iraqi,
Yeah.
the translation I see is like
Yeah.
gossip. But I think I
Yeah.
know that's the wrong definition.
So that, I would say like a chit chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having fun, sitting down and talking.
Yeah.
Hey, got that.
Or I remember
Yeah.
I used to go to the Khoja community,
Yes.
and then as soon as the match is over, they say, chill, we'll have some baraza.
Baraza,
Like,
Yeah.
exactly,
For
yeah.
years, I'm like, I don't know what
This is
baraza
normal
is.
for us.
Yeah.
We're
Just like a
used to it.
chit chat, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Sawa.
Nice. We learn from each other. Alhamdulillah. Thank you, sister. Thanks, Sayed Ali, and everyone at home. Thank you as well. We will see you next week. Stay tuned. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.